Hello everyone, this is Hakaym and welcome back to some more World of Warships, and I'm finally going to do a review on the new Tier 9 USN Heavy Cruiser, the Buffalo. And I do apologize, this actually did take me a little bit longer than I really anticipated, but for whatever reason I just had issues with getting a good game with the ship, and she's not a bad ship. I really think she's sexy, so I will have to give her credit that. But let's actually take a look at the teams. We are playing on Atlantic, playing Domination. I am joined with a couple of my clanmates, Lord E in the Rune and Ty in the Fletcher. Essentially a tier 9 battle. We have Ismo, Bismarck, Lion, Buffalo, 3 Runes, 2 Clevelands, 1 New Orleans, a Fletcher, and a Z39. On the enemy team, there is a Maggie, Missouri, Colorado, Leon, 2 Buffaloes, St. Louis, Rune, Cleveland, Hipper, Prince Eugen, and a Fletcher. And the Buffalo, let's actually talk about the ship as we're quickly trying to make our way to this island to ensure that we are able to assist with the B-cap with our radar. And that's one thing I'm not a big fan of the USN Cruiser line coming out, is the fact that a lot of them, once you get up to tier 8 and above, have radar, and there's a lot of radar going on right now, and even more so with the new and updated Grosavoy that's being apparently super tested with radar. So we are detected. Now, one thing to keep in mind, your detect is 10.5, your radar is 9.4, which is slightly of a difference when you're trying to push into a cap. A good destroyer captain can keep the Buffalo at distance and not really be spotted. Now we are currently battling off against another Buffalo, and the Buffalo has the super heavy AEP, which is very beneficial because it does penetrate even against slightly angled targets that you would expect otherwise not to be citadeled. The Buffalo can obviously do this, and nice thing about it, especially this Buffalo that's going to be stationary, I think he's actually almost run aground, just decides to start reversing. And you can kind of see one thing I don't like about the Buffalo. The Buffalo's reload rate is a staggering 11 seconds compared to the Baltimore's 8-second reload rate. And it does seem like it does take forever just to get your shots down range, especially if you are facing off against a Des Moines, which can easily fire 3 salvos to your 1. But this Buffalo is getting focused down relatively quickly, and we should be able to take him out here in a moment. Last salvo is going in, and there we go. First blood goes to us, and now we are in a fairly decent location that does ensure we are going to be protected from our side. But we do know there is a Fletcher around, and more than likely he has dropped torpedoes, so I am going to in fact reverse and try to get back into the safety of this island. And that's really a good demonstration, and something you definitely need to learn when you are playing USN Cruisers is islands are your friends. You must love your islands and cherish them, because that's what USN Cruisers are really good at, is holding down a location. They're very difficult to actually remove for the most part. Obviously does not have any possibility of torpedoes. Still don't know why USN Cruisers don't have torpedoes. Maybe just because they don't want that many ships to have torpedoes. And look, there's torpedoes incoming. Yeah, but we're now more in a safe location, no longer spotted, and we should be able to get shots off on some battleships that are starting to push northeast. And it looks like the enemy team is pushing quite heavily towards the sea cap. It does look like our team has in fact obviously taken A, and we are still contesting B because that Fletcher is still being a pester. But with the fact that I am in this actually fairly good location, I can radar the cap, because for the most part my radar, it does cover the majority of the cap. Now Lion, or Leon I guess technically is how I should be properly saying this, does start to push out, and you can kind of understand why I think and why I do like the guns. The guns hit hard, the guns can cause a decent amount of fire. And there's the Fletcher once again, and obviously he's going to be running away. Now the Buffalo does have the strongest broadside compared to any of the USN Cruisers, because she does have 8 turrets to the normal 3 turret setup, which obviously does leave much to be desired. But the only major issue is the fact that your reload rate is so stinking slow. I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm spoiled by the Des Moines, and it's just the fact that it can reload its guns so much faster. But anyways, let's move on from the guns, because I've talked a lot about the guns. Guns are fairly decent. The AA on the ship is incredible. CB captains, avoid Buffalo, especially if they go to be a AA spec captain. The AA is terrifying on the ship, not as strong as a Des Moines. And keep in mind, this captain does not and is not past 11 points, so no advanced firing training or anything like that, but still very strong AA, and she can get up to 4 charges of defensive fire, which is very potent. Another nice thing about the Buffalo is her speed is a little bit quicker. That does obviously very beneficial, but for the most part, as you can see, the gameplay style of the USN Cruiser is just holding down a location and lobbing shells. The shell arcs are fantastic. Now, as I have mentioned, I have had difficulty with this cruiser, and I think it really comes down to the fact of her armor. Her armor is obviously, she's squishy. That's kind of just the USN Cruiser line. They're squishy, their side armor is squishy, and their bow armor can be overmatched. USN Cruisers do have protection against other cruiser AP, except for the Stalingrad or the Kronstadt. So those are obviously one major benefit, but any battleship that does get close to you and able to fire a salvo into your bow can overmatch your bow and can lead to quite a devastating hit. One other thing I have noticed is her stern seems to be very weak. You don't have to show off a lot of your side, and you will be penetrated and citadeled, which does mean you will be taking a lot of damage. So the Buffalo does really depend on being protected by islands, and as you can see, this is kind of what the US Cruisers are just really good at, just hunkering down by an island and opening up. But I think it is actually a good idea to actually start moving in a little bit closer, trying to support our team as much as possible. Now this Amagi, I probably could have switched over to the AP. Range is a little bit lofty, but we can get some penetrating shots due to the shells dropping in from a much higher angle, so we might be able to actually penetrate through the deck armor. But we gotta be also a little bit closer does really help, because once again it is super heavy AP, which does a much better job penetrating. Now this Amagi is just going to get focused down because he does have a fire, and it should go down here in a moment. Now the match is fairly tied on the number of ships, though this Amagi will obviously grant us the lead, but there's also a Fletcher who has been proven to be quite of an annoyance for our Z39, who is trying to chase him down, but we have just lost our New Orleans, and the Z39 probably is going to go down here in a moment, just due to the fact that the Fletcher is going to be slightly better at a gunfight, but also due to the fact that there is a Buffalo trying to assist their Fletcher. So this Z39 has made a interesting choice, to say the very least. So now that we're able to actually get into a much better position, we're going to try to once again hug an island. And the speed on the Buffalo is not bad, 33 knots. With the speed flag, you can get up to around 34 knots, 34.5 I believe. And honestly, I do have to complain how she kind of sits and maneuvers in the water, and that is due to the fact that she does have a much bigger turning circle radius than the Baltimore that was originally at tier 9. But at the moment I am hoping to finish off that lonely buffalo, but unfortunately it does look like he is not going to be spotted. And in this time we have in fact lost a few more ships and are now down 2 ships to our 6. So things could easily sway in to the enemy team's favor. But as you can see, the positioning on the enemy team is not that great. They're all hunkered up north. They're starting to come out one at a time, while we are in fact going to be fairly close. We're all in a very centralized location, able to open up on any ship that does decide to come out into the open. And that's never a good idea, is to come out in a single file line. Now I am trying to at least assist and hoping once again to spot this enemy buffalo, but he is staying silent, and at the moment we're not spotted. So that Fletcher is not coming back towards B, which quite possibly means, as we just now see him pop up on radar, as the Cleveland did pop his radar. It did in fact look like he was going towards the A cap, trying to get that cap wrested away from us, but with the Cleveland on the case, should prevent that Fletcher from actually achieving that. Now, at the moment, we're not in a particularly great position. We're not able to really assist, but we do see a St. Louis, and I love my St. Louis, don't get me wrong. It is a good tier 9 cruiser, but it is a long-range cruiser, and this St. Louis is coming around the corner, and, well, I don't do this very often because this does take forever just to reverse around a corner, but at the exact same time, I want to be able to at least be able to pull away, and there is a St. Louis. We were not detected. Should be a nasty surprise against the St. Louis. And did I mention she has a very strong broadside, 5 citadels on that St. Louis, leaving him very low on health, and the St. Louis is not firing its guns. I wonder why. There we go. St. Louis is now dead. Last citadel did take him out, and now we are once again back in the safety, and no real damage is able to be accrued upon us. And we should be able to open up on any of these battleships that decide to continue pushing. Now we do have a Fletcher, that is Ty in the Fletcher, kind of spotting, but unfortunately the Cleveland on the enemy team pops around the corner and is more than likely going to pop radar. And oh, yeah, St. Louis did fire those torpedoes, but this rune is going to have a very bad day to these torpedoes and is in fact going to go down, leaving his poor lonely Missouri all by himself. Now, thoughts on the Buffalo. I think she is a improved version compared to the Baltimore. My main conflict, I guess you could say, is just her reload rate is so stinking slow. It is probably my least favorite thing about the Buffalo, but I think she's a good ship. I think with the proper patience and understanding of the USN Cruisers, you shouldn't have any difficulty playing this tier 9. Because one thing you do have to keep in mind, more than likely you will be playing tier 10 a lot, and that's not particularly fun, especially if you run up against a Des Moines, which has a much faster reload compared to you. But this battle is in fact going to end here in a moment. We are at 936 points, and the enemy team is just not able to pull it back from us. But firepower on Buffalo, not bad. Yeah, I'd say it's not a bad ship. Not bad at all. Can be quite devastating, especially against a broadside Missouri. Let's see if we can get some shell hits. And I would recommend firing AP against broadside battleships at this range. You can do fairly significant amount of damage. But unfortunately for us, time is just going to end, and the reload rate on these guns are so stinking slow. But with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into port. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this battle, and I will see you guys there. Alright everyone, welcome back to the port, and the Buffalo's actually a really nice ship. I will have to say I have had difficulties, but I think she's probably a very strong substitute compared to the Baltimore, and also I think she looks sexy, so she gets kind of a point for me. But let's actually take a look at the stats. I'm also going to compare her to the previous tier 9, the Baltimore, and we're going to kind of compare between the two. So let's go ahead and start off with the survivability of the ship. 47,800 versus the original 42,700. So you definitely have more health compared to the original Baltimore. And your armor is also a little bit more. You have from a minimum of 6 to 229 millimeters. And I actually looked for that 6 millimeter plating, but couldn't find it. But for the most part, a lot of your armor is going to be 27 millimeters, especially at the bow and the stern of the ship, while the Baltimore had 25 to 152 millimeters. So your armor is a little bit better, though I do feel like she does seem to get penetrated quite easily, especially if you're not in a very well positioned area. But even at a slight angle, battleships can easily overpin your armor. Torpedo protection is very similar to the Baltimore at 4%, so that really hasn't much changed, but at least you have more health. Moving on to the artillery, and this is where the big factor is. She has 4 triple 203 millimeters, exact same shells as the Baltimore, so you have those super heavy AP shells. However, with this additional turret, you get a kind of negative downside, and that comes down to her reload rate. This is with the additional module that increases the reload rate of the Buffalo. Your reload rate is a whopping 11.4 seconds, which is not the greatest in the world. Compared to, especially if you compare it to the Baltimore at 8.8 seconds. And if you face off against a Des Moines, which normally has about 5-second reload time, you are going to struggle. Your reload time feels terribly long. It's very similar to kind of how the Zao plays, but you don't have these Zao's arcs. They are, once again, the USN Cruisers. The turret rotation is 30.4 seconds, very similar to the Baltimore. Damage and the HE and the AP is the exact same as the Baltimore, 2,800 for the HE with a 14% fire chance and 5,000 points of AP damage. And then we move on to the range. Range is slightly increased from the Baltimore by 200 meters. Not a big change, but it's 200 additional meters you can shoot, which is very beneficial. So I will have to say she has a strong broadside, just due to the fact that she has this additional turret. And this additional turret kind of extends out your boat a little bit more, which does make her seem very long. She looks and feels like she does take a little bit more time to actually get turned, a little bit more susceptible and easier to hit, but that's kind of my opinion. Moving on to AA defense, she is stronger than the Baltimore in AA caliber. She has 16 dual 20 millimeters with average damage of 129 with 2 kilometer range. Then you have 4 dual 40 millimeters with an average damage of 60 with a 3.5 kilometer range. Then you have 11 quadruple 40 millimeters. Average damage is 231 with a 3.5 kilometer range. And then you have 6 dual 127 millimeters. Average damage is 120 with a 5 kilometer range. The Baltimore had 23 single 20 millimeter Oerlikons and 12 quadruple 40 millimeter Bofors and 6 dual 127 millimeter MK32s, which once again, there is only a slight increase in the damage output that the Buffalo has over the Baltimore, but every little bit does help. Moving on to maneuverability, once again, slight buff and slight downside to this ship. Main difference is the max speed is slightly better than the Baltimore at 33 knots versus the Baltimore's 32.5 knots. A half a knot is not that crazy, but it can help you out a little bit. Downside is, once again, because the ship is actually longer than what the Baltimore is, she has a higher turning circle radius at 800 meters versus the Baltimore's 730 meters. So that is considerably not appreciative when you're trying to be able to turn. And another downside is her rudder shift time is a lousy 11.2 seconds. Now you can get that reduced down to 9 seconds, but versus the Baltimore at 4.7 seconds, it's quite considerably noticeable when you're trying to be a little bit more agile, being able to dodge shells, and it kind of sucks, I will have to say. So rudder shift time is kind of a negative for me. Moving on to concealment, probably should also mention you're not always going to be out in open water. You're going to be more hunkered down by an island. That's usually the normal USN Cruiser play, but having that additional maneuverability is beneficial all the same. Moving on to concealment, detectability range by sea is 10.5 kilometers, which is slightly better than the Baltimore at 10.8, and air is just slightly better at 7.9 versus 8 kilometers. So slight buffs, and there are some negative aspects of the Buffalo. Moving on to the actual modules themselves, you don't have an upgrade to the weapon, which the Baltimore once did, which did allow the Baltimore to get the essentially super heavy AP that the Boyne enjoys. This, you no longer actually need to research it, you automatically have it. And everything else is fairly straightforward. Increased survivability, increase AA, reduce rudder shift time, and this obviously increases your range by 10%. As far as what upgrades I've gone for, I went for the fairly normal. I have gone for the increased defensive AA, just make her a little bit more scary to any CV players. And I will have to say, with the USN Cruiser line coming out, I would not want to be playing CV right now because it generally is going to suck for them. Aiming system mod 1. Then this, like I said, you can get steering gears mod 2, which reduces your rudder shift time. But having that propulsion mod 2, since you're going to be more hunkered down, is beneficial because it does allow you to spring forward if needs be, or get out of line of fire or torpedoes. Concealment as usual, and last but not least, main battery mod 3. If you do not get this, and I don't know why you would, because you really don't need this because your shell arc is very, very high. This obviously reduces your reload rate, and if you don't have it, your reload rate is around 13 seconds, which is a very long time because that's essentially what the Zhao has, and Zhao is far better at shooting at long range than you are. Moving on to the captain. The captain is only an 11-point captain. Very basic as far as what I've gone for. Priority target, expert marksman, just make sure your guns turn a little bit quicker. Basics firing training, and concealment expert. You can, depending on your playstyle, I will probably build this as a cruiser. Adrenaline rush is very beneficial. Superintendent, even getting demolition expert is very beneficial. And so that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. And if you like what you saw, hit the like and subscribe button. You guys have a great and fantastic day. Zaijian.